The NHL has changed. It isn't the bruising, unforgiving league it used to be, and the true enforcer has almost disappeared because of it. But back when the role mattered, no one embodied it like Bob Probert. At 6'3", 230 pounds, Probert wasn't just a fighter. He was fear personified, a man whose name alone could change the temperature of a game, a man who could score 30 goals, then beat the brakes off the toughest guy on your roster, all in the same night. He was the last of hockey's true wild men, impossibly skilled, impossibly tough, and living a life off the ice that felt more like a rock star than an athlete. This is the story of how Bob Probert became the most feared NHL forward of all time. Bob Probert was born in Windsor, Ontario, a place where hockey is a religion, and it was no different for a young Probert, who began his minor career there. His talent was easy to see even from a young age, and he eventually played his way into a spot on the Brantford Alexanders of the Ontario Hockey League. During his time in the Canadian juniors, Probert began his reputation as an enforcer almost by accident. As said in his memoir, Tough Guy, Probert claims that he knocked out an opponent during a fight with a lucky punch. And from there, a reputation was born. So he decided to develop his fighting skills on the ice. But unlike most of the enforcers Probert would go on to play against, he was a talented forward who could score goals and zip passes to teammates, giving him a much more well-rounded game than your standard goon. It was during his time in junior hockey that some of Probert's off-ice tendencies would also begin to emerge, as he began drinking alcohol as a 14-year-old. Ultimately resulting in a drinking problem by the time he was 17. This would become a theme that impacts his time in the NHL later on. While playing for the Alexanders, Probert scored 101 points in 116 games, and at the end of his first season was drafted by the Detroit Red Wings in the third round of the 1983 NHL entry draft. He would spend another 2 years in the OHL before joining up with the Red Wings in 1985. In his first season, despite appearing in just 44 games, he racked up 186 minutes in the sin bin, averaging just over 2 minors per game, well on his way to establishing his reputation as a bruiser. Over the next few years, the penalty minutes would only increase, culminating in the 1987-88 season, which would be one for the history books. That year, he amassed a staggering 398 penalty minutes, which still stands as the 6th most in a single season all time. But on top of his infractions on the ice, he would put together an outstanding season in the points column, scoring 29 goals to go along with 33 assists, finishing with 62 points in 74 games. This impressive body of work earned him an all-star selection and showed that his coaches had trust in him to be more than just a goon on the ice, as he played genuine top 6 minutes and had a big role in the Red Wings' run to the conference finals. During the playoffs, with future Hall of Fame Steve Yzerman injured for all but the final 3 games, Probert led the team in playoff scoring, showing his significance to the team outside the penalty box. During these first few years of Probert's career, he had established himself as the premier tough guy, the enforcer everybody feared, and became infamous for his willingness to take on anybody at any time in a fight. He famously went toe-to-toe with some of the other legendary enforcers of the era, guys like Marty McSorley, Ty Domi, and Tony Twist. His battles with Ty Domi became the stuff of legend. Not just fights, but 2 of the toughest men in the league testing each other every time they dropped the gloves. What made him such a force to be reckoned with in a fight was the combination of his massive frame and balance. He could take brutal punches and never go down, using his leverage and power to come right back at opponents. He also displayed superhuman endurance, only gathering strength the longer a slugfest would go on for. Because of his supremacy in a fight, he possessed a psychological edge on other players. Who would admit to being nervous facing him? Some of the players he came up against had this to say about him. "I've fought him like 8 or 9 times in my career. You were always thinking about it, that's for sure, before the game. Because he was a big man, very strong, obviously powerful, tough, but a real honest guy out there. Never tried to do anything dirty or anything like that. Very honest player. That man was as tough as any man I've ever fought, NHL or minor leagues. He'll go down in history as the best fighter in the league. The thing is, he can also play. He gave a lot of tough guys the impression that if you were that tough, you could become a pretty good player at that level because no one would ever be crazy enough to take you on after a while. Going into the 1988-89 season, this seemed like the moment Probert could establish himself as one of the top players in the league, not just an enforcer. But things took a different, more unfortunate turn as Probert's off-ice demons would finally begin to interfere with his career. In March 1989, Probert was crossing the Detroit-Windsor Bridge. American customs agents searched Probert and his vehicle and discovered 14 grams of cocaine. He was convicted and served 3 months in prison, followed by another 3 months in a halfway house, putting his playing career on pause following an immediate suspension after his arrest. The incident publicized Probert's struggles with drugs and alcohol that had followed him since his junior league days. In his autobiography, Probert detailed trying cocaine for the first time after winning the AHL championship with the Adirondack Red Wings, kickstarting an addiction. He had kept his struggles private during the start of his playing career, but they had been bubbling under the surface until the moment of his arrest. After serving his prison term and his suspension from the league, he returned in March 1990, a year after the initial arrest. He was welcomed back to the Red Wings by being named an alternate captain and continued to accumulate penalty minutes, but also produced points on a regular basis, averaging around 40 points per season between 1990 and 1993. He continued to play a big role in a team consistently making the playoffs, and by this time had become one of the most popular players in the league, not just among fans, but his fellow NHLers. His combination of brute strength, technical finesse with the puck, and his off-ice antics made him a unique character in the league, and one that was embraced for the color he brought to the sport. Probert's demons would come back to haunt him and end his tenure with the Red Wings after the 93-94 season. He found himself in legal trouble yet again after crashing his motorcycle into a car in West Bloomfield, Michigan. After a police search, Probert was found to be 3 times over the legal blood alcohol level and had traces of cocaine in his system. Already set to be a free agent going into the offseason, the Red Wings organization announced that they would not be re-signing Probert, lamenting the difficulty in dealing with his legal problems and substance abuse. He would sign with the Chicago Blackhawks during free agency, but his debut with the team would have to wait as Probert was added to the inactive list by NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman as he entered rehab. But upon returning, Probert seemed to be back to his usual self, spending plenty of time in the sin bin, but once again hitting 40 points in the 1995-96 season. From this point, however, Probert's point production began to gradually decline, and his time on ice began resembling the more traditional enforcer role, where he would rely on his physical play rather than his play with the puck. His time in Chicago would also be filled with injury struggles, missing parts of the last 5 seasons of his career. Probert would retire at the conclusion of the 2001-02 season, with his legacy cemented as one of the greatest enforcers the league had ever seen, or ever will. In 16 seasons of NHL play, he played 935 games, putting up 384 points and a staggering 3,300 penalty minutes, putting him at 5th most in a career. Probert's standing as an NHL icon would endure, with fans warmly remembering his many rivalries with other enforcers, as well as his talent on the ice, and for being part of some great Detroit Red Wings teams. He would remain a presence in hockey, taking part in charity games, speaking at conventions, and hosting youth hockey events. He attended Red Wings events such as the retiring of teammate Steve Yzerman's jersey, remaining a part of the team's community. But his personal struggles would continue to play a major role in his life, resulting in more arrests. In June 2004, Probert was arrested in Florida after parking his car on the wrong side of the road and getting into an altercation with bystanders. When officers showed up, Probert resisted arrest, resulting in the police having to use a taser to subdue him. The charges were ultimately dropped, allowing Probert to escape more prison time. Another incident at his home in Ontario, he was once again arrested for an incident with a police officer, and he was charged with assaulting a police officer after being tased. These charges would also eventually be dropped. Probert's personal problems would end up taking a toll. and in July 2010, during a heat wave, he collapsed from a heart attack that would take his life at the age of 45. The news stunned the hockey world. For so many fans, Probert seemed almost superhuman. The one guy who couldn't be hurt, couldn't be broken, and suddenly he was gone. Following his death, there was a tremendous outpouring of grief from the hockey world, with former teammates commemorating their fallen comrade. His captain Yzerman had this to say about Probert. He was a rugged hockey player and an unselfish teammate who was willing to do anything for his team. And most notably, he had a kind heart and gentle soul. Probert's life ended in tragedy, but his legacy didn't. To teammates, he was a warrior with a gentle soul. To fans, he was a rock star in skates. To opponents, he was a nightmare dressed in red and white. Most enforcers were one-dimensional. Probert wasn't. He could fight, he could score. He could change the emotion of a game with a single shift. And even with all the chaos that followed him off the ice, his impact on the sport has only grown with time. Today, in a league where enforcers are nearly extinct, Bob Probert stands as the gold standard, the last great heavyweight of hockey, the most feared forward the NHL has ever seen, and one of the most unforgettable characters the sport will ever produce.